At my graduation party, my parents announced they were selling my childhood home and giving the money to my brother since he actually needs it. I'd just gotten a $120,000 job offer. So I just smiled and said, "Congratulations." 3 months later, they called asking for help with rent. I just said, "Ask the one who actually needs it," and hung up. They haven't stopped calling since. I, 25 am, graduated top of my class from one of the best engineering programs in the country. The day should have been mine. Instead, it became the day I learned exactly where I stood in my family's hierarchy. The party was at our house, the same 3-bedroom ranch I'd grown up in. Mom had made her famous lasagna, and relatives I hadn't seen in years showed up with cards and congratulations. My younger brother sat in the corner on his phone, barely acknowledging anyone. He was 22 and had dropped out of community college after one semester. Since then, he'd been living at home, working part-time at a grocery store when he felt like it. I just finished thanking my favorite professor for coming when Dad clinked his glass. Everyone turned to look. My stomach twisted with that premonitory dread you get right before something terrible happens, though I couldn't have explained why. Dad announced that this party was about more than just my graduation. He said they had important family news to share. Mom stood beside him, smiling in that tight way she does when she's nervous. Then he dropped it. They were selling the house. The market was hot, and they'd already accepted an offer. They'd be moving into a 2-bedroom apartment across town. I felt my smile freeze on my face. The house had been in our family for 30 years. I'd taken my first steps in the living room. My growth chart was still penciled on the kitchen doorframe. But what came next made the room tilt sideways. Dad explained that they'd be giving the proceeds to my brother because he actually needed it. Those were his exact words. My brother needed help getting started in life. He needed a cushion. Meanwhile, I had a job offer from a major tech firm starting at $120,000 a year, so clearly I'd be fine. The room went quiet. A few relatives shifted uncomfortably. My aunt looked at me with something like pity. My brother didn't even look up from his phone. I stood there holding my glass of sparkling cider, my diploma still on the table behind me, and felt something fundamental shift inside my chest. Not anger, not yet. Just a cold, clear understanding settling over me like ice water. I smiled wider and said congratulations. I raised my glass and toasted to new beginnings. Mom looked relieved. Dad clapped me on the shoulder and told me he knew I'd understand. I was always the responsible one, he said, the one who had his head on straight. The party continued. I made small talk. I cut the cake. I opened cards with checks that suddenly felt like guilt money from relatives who knew something wrong had just happened but didn't know how to address it. All the while, my mind was working through the implications. They'd made this decision without consulting me. They'd timed the announcement for maximum public pressure, ensuring I couldn't object without looking selfish. They'd positioned it as helping my brother when really, it was about rewarding his failure while taking my success for granted. The house I'd grown up in, the home that held every memory of my childhood, was being liquidated to bankroll my brother's extended adolescence. When the last guest left, I helped clean up. Mom asked if I was okay with everything, her voice carefully casual. I told her I understood completely. She hugged me and said she knew I would. Dad reminded me that family helps family, and now that I was going to be making good money, I should remember where I came from. I nodded and smiled and finished loading the dishwasher. That night, I sat in my childhood bedroom and made a list. Not an angry list, but a practical one. I itemized every boundary I was about to set, every expectation I was about to demolish, every assumption they'd made about my continued involvement in their lives that I was about to prove wrong. I moved out 2 weeks later. I'd already signed the lease on a 1-bedroom apartment near my new job. Mom cried and said I was leaving so soon. I reminded her they were selling the house anyway. Dad said I could have stayed until closing. I thanked him and said I didn't want to be in the way during their transition. My brother helped me carry exactly 1 box to my car before going back inside to play video games. The job was everything I'd hoped for. The work was challenging, the team was brilliant, and the salary was even better than advertised once benefits were factored in. I threw myself into it completely. I worked late. I volunteered for extra projects. I made myself invaluable. I also went completely quiet on the family front. I stopped answering casual texts. I stopped showing up to Sunday dinners. When Mom called to chat, I kept conversations brief and surface level. Work was busy. Yes, everything was fine. No, I didn't need anything. I had to go. The house sold quickly. I heard about it through a cousin. Apparently, the buyer paid cash, and they closed in 30 days. My brother got a check for $270,000. He bought a new truck, a bunch of camera equipment for a YouTube channel he never started, and moved into a luxury apartment downtown. 3 months passed. I got a promotion. My boss said I had a real future with the company. I bought nice furniture. I went on dates. I lived my life exactly as I wanted to live it, without the weight of expectation or the burden of being the family's designated success story who owed everyone else a piece of his accomplishment. Then Mom called. It was a Tuesday evening, and I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. She sounded stressed. She asked how I was doing, but didn't wait for an answer before explaining why she was really calling. Their apartment rent was increasing. Dad's hours at work had been cut. They were having trouble making ends meet. She asked if I could help them with rent for a few months until they got back on their feet. I let the silence stretch for a moment. Then I asked about my brother. She said he wasn't in a position to help. He'd made some bad investments. The truck payments were high. He had his own expenses. I told her I understood. I suggested they ask the one who actually needs it. Then I hung up. She called back immediately. I didn't answer. Dad called an hour later. I let it go to voicemail. He said I was being childish. He said family was family, and I needed to step up. He said they'd done everything for me growing up, and this was how I repaid them. I deleted the voicemail without finishing it. The calls kept coming, multiple times a day at first, then tapering off to once daily. I blocked their numbers. They started calling from other phones, relatives' phones, even my brother's phone, though he never actually spoke when I accidentally answered once. My aunt, the one who'd looked at me with pity at the graduation party, reached out via email. She said she understood why I was hurt, but my parents really were struggling. She said pride shouldn't keep families apart. I wrote back and asked if she remembered what they'd said at my graduation party. I asked if she thought it was pride that was keeping us apart, or consequences. She didn't respond. For months after that first call, I came home to find Mom sitting in the hallway outside my apartment. She'd somehow gotten past the building security. She looked older, tired, and for a moment I almost caved. She asked why I was doing this. She said she was my mother. She said she'd raised me, sacrificed for me, and this was cruel. I asked her where this energy was when they were selling my childhood home without discussion. I asked her if she'd considered whether giving everything to my brother was cruel. I asked her if she remembered telling me I'd understand because I was the responsible one. She said that was different. He needed the money. I told her I needed to feel valued as more than just the family ATM. Then I asked her to leave or I'd call building security. She left, but not before telling me I'd regret this. Update 1. It's been 6 months since I stopped taking their calls. The silence from my end has been absolute. I blocked their numbers, their emails, even their social media profiles. I'd heard through the extended family grapevine that things had gotten worse for them. My brother apparently blew through most of the money within 8 months. The truck got repossessed after he missed 3 payments. The luxury apartment was gone, replaced by a room in a friend's basement. The camera equipment got sold off piecemeal. He was back to his part-time grocery store job, except now he had debt and no safety net. My parents had to move to a cheaper apartment in a worse neighborhood. Dad picked up a second job doing weekend security work. Mom was selling things online, the kinds of family heirlooms and keepsakes she'd once said were priceless. I saw a listing for my grandmother's china set going for $200. She'd once told me it would be mine someday. The family had fractured over this. Some relatives thought I was being unnecessarily harsh. Others, particularly the ones with their own golden child stories, quietly reached out to say they understood. My aunt sent another email saying she got it now. Her own daughter had been the responsible one, and she recognized the pattern. Thanksgiving came. I spent it with friends, people from work who'd become closer to me than my blood relatives. We cooked together, laughed, played games, and nobody asked me for money or told me I owed anyone anything. My parents spent it alone. My brother didn't even show up. Then my brother called me. Not from someone else's phone this time, but from his own number, which I'd forgotten to block. I answered out of sheer surprise. He didn't ask how I was. He immediately launched into a rant about how I was destroying the family. He said I was selfish and arrogant. He said just because I got lucky with a good job didn't mean I was better than everyone else. He said Mom was crying herself to sleep and Dad's health was deteriorating from stress, and it was all my fault. I let him finish. Then I asked him one question. I asked if he'd offered to get a full-time job to help them. He said that wasn't the point. The point was I had money and they needed help. I told him that was exactly the point. I told him he'd gotten $250,000 and pissed it away in under a year while I'd been building a career since I was 16. I told him Mom and Dad had made a choice about who to invest in, and now they were living with the consequences of choosing wrong. Then I told him to lose my number and hung up. He texted me afterward, a long rambling message about family loyalty and obligation. I blocked him and felt nothing. But I did feel something when I found out what happened next. A cousin told me that after my brother's call failed, my parents had tried a different approach. They'd reached out to my company. They'd called the main line, somehow gotten transferred to HR, and explained that their son worked there. They said I was going through a difficult time and making bad decisions due to stress. They asked if the company had an employee assistance program or if someone could check on my mental health. HR called me in for a meeting. My boss was there, looking concerned. They gently explained what had happened and asked if I was okay. I was so angry I had to take a moment to breathe before responding. Then I explained the situation calmly and professionally. I told them my parents and I were estranged due to financial boundary issues, and their call was an attempt to manipulate me through my employer. I assured them I was mentally sound and performing well in my role. My boss looked relieved. HR made a note in my file and assured me they wouldn't accept calls about me from family members without my explicit permission. They apologized for the intrusion. I thanked them and went back to work. But that night, I drafted an email. I sent it to my parents, my brother, and several key family members. I laid out everything. The graduation announcement, the subsequent expectation that I'd bankroll them, the harassment, and now the attempt to sabotage my career. I explained that I would not be responding to any further contact from them. I explained that this was not negotiable, not temporary, and not something that would change if they found the right words or the right pressure point. I explained that they'd taught me a valuable lesson. They'd taught me that love in our family was conditional on utility, and I was done being useful. The responses were mixed. Some family members said I was harsh, but justified. Others said I was throwing away my family over money. My brother sent a furious response that I didn't read past the first line. My parents sent nothing. A week later, my cousin told me they'd moved again. Even cheaper place. Dad had quit his second job because the stress was causing chest pains. Mom had started working at a discount store part-time. I felt a twinge at that. Not guilt exactly, but something adjacent to it. I'd been raised to take care of family. That conditioning doesn't disappear overnight. But then I remembered my graduation party. I remembered standing there with my diploma and my job offer and hearing that I didn't need help because I'd be fine. I remembered the implication that my success meant I was no longer entitled to consideration or support or even sentiment about my childhood home. The twinge faded. Update 2. It's been over a year now since that graduation party. I'm 26 and my life is unrecognizable from what it was. I made senior engineer 6 months ago, a promotion that usually takes 3 years. My salary is now pushing $160,000 with stock options. I bought a condo. I have a girlfriend who comes from a functional family and cannot comprehend my stories about mine. I've traveled to 4 countries. I'm happy in a way I didn't know was possible. And my parents are still struggling. The calls never fully stopped. They just changed form. Now it's medical bills. Dad had a minor heart incident. Nothing serious, but the bills are crushing them. Mom needs dental work she can't afford. Their car died, and they're using public transportation. Every message is a new crisis. Every email is a new emergency. And every single one ends with a variation of the same theme. I have the money. They're my parents. Surely I can spare something. My brother, meanwhile, has somehow made things worse. He took out loans against the expectation of future earnings. Apparently, he'd convinced himself he was going to be a social media influencer and borrowed money to fund that fantasy. When it predictably failed, he defaulted. Now he's facing legal action from creditors and has moved back home with my parents. Back home, into their tiny 2-bedroom apartment where they can barely afford rent themselves. My mother sent a particularly manipulative email last month. She told me my brother was depressed. She said he talked about suicide sometimes. She said if something happened to him, I'd have to live with the knowledge that I could have helped but chose not to. I read that email 3 times. Then I reported it to the police for a wellness check. 2 officers showed up at their apartment. My brother was fine, just playing video games. Embarrassed, but fine. The officers documented that there was no immediate danger and left. My mother called me screaming. She said I'd humiliated them in front of their neighbors. She said I'd weaponized the police against my own family. She said I was a monster. I told her she'd weaponized suicide threats to try to manipulate me, and I'd responded appropriately. I told her if she ever implied self-harm again, I'd do the same thing. Then I hung up. That seems to have finally broken something. The calls have mostly stopped. I get an occasional text, usually around holidays, but the constant barrage has ended. Instead, I've been hearing from extended family about what's being said about me. Apparently, I'm the villain in this story as they tell it. I'm the ungrateful son who abandoned his family in their time of need. I'm the one who let success go to his head and forgot where he came from. My brother apparently tells people I stole his inheritance, that the house should have been split equally, and I manipulated my parents into cutting him out. The irony would be funny if it weren't so pathetic. But here's what nobody talks about. Nobody mentions that they made their choice at my graduation party. Nobody mentions that they gave him everything and expected me to be grateful for the opportunity to earn my own way. Nobody mentions that they only valued me when they needed something from me. My girlfriend asked me recently if I'd ever reconcile with them. She comes from a close family and struggles to understand permanent estrangement. She asked what it would take. I thought about it, really thought about it, and I realized there's probably nothing. Not because I'm holding a grudge, but because they've never once apologized. They've never acknowledged what they did was hurtful. They've never taken responsibility for their choices. Every contact has been about what I can do for them. Every message has been about my obligation. Not once has anyone said they were sorry for taking me for granted. So what would reconciliation even look like? Me paying their bills while they continue to enable my brother? Me being the family ATM while receiving nothing but expectations in return? Me pretending the graduation party never happened? I told my girlfriend probably not. She looked sad but nodded. Last week, I got a wedding invitation in the mail. A cousin on my dad's side, someone I used to be close with growing up. The invitation included a +1. I debated going. My parents will definitely be there. I decided to RSVP yes. Not because I want to reconcile, but because I'm done hiding. I'm done being made to feel like I'm the problem. I've built a good life. I have nothing to apologize for. If they want to make it awkward, that's their choice. I'll show up with my girlfriend, congratulate the couple, and leave. If my parents try to make a scene, that reflects on them, not me. I told my girlfriend about the decision. She asked if I was sure. I said I was. She asked what I'd do if they approached me. I told her I'd be polite and civil. I'd treat them exactly like distant relatives I barely know. Because that's what they've become. She asked if that would hurt. Honestly, I don't think it will. That's what a year of distance has given me. Clarity, perspective, and the understanding that DNA doesn't obligate you to accept mistreatment. The wedding is in 3 weeks. I bought a new suit. I'm actually looking forward to it. Not for the confrontation, there may not even be one, but for the statement it makes. I'm still standing. I'm thriving, actually. And I did it without their help, just like they always assumed I would. Turns out they were right about one thing. I really didn't need their help. I just needed them to stop treating my success like it belonged to them. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with friends or family who might enjoy it too.